Yeah, I think it's really important to constantly update and reinvigorate these characters, and it's not even something we have to do, it's something I think happens naturally. You know, when Superman first appeared, he was the champion of the oppressed in the 1930s at a time of Great Depression. During the war, he was a super patriot, suddenly the opposite of the man that he'd been 10 years previously. In the 60s, he became a kind of cosmic seeker. In the 80s, he's a yuppie, you know, and I could talk through every decade, and the characters have kind of responded and become the superhero that that particular decade's needs demand. So the idea was to do something, if it was going to be this important, if it was, you know, the last Action Comics was in 1938, #1, everything about it is very different from what we're used to seeing. Even his outfit is very different. We're going to tell the story of how he wound up with the familiar Superman outfit, but for this opening episode and for these opening 6 issues, it's a completely different look for Superman that kind of does away with the familiar outfit.
At the time of this video's release, James Gunn's long-awaited Superman film is set to be released worldwide tomorrow. There's been a lot of conversation surrounding this project ever since it was first announced back in late 2022. Not only is this the beginning of a brand new cinematic universe for DC, but it's also the Man of Tomorrow's first solo movie since 2013, and the second major attempt to reboot this beloved comic book character. And with all the excitement and conversation going on surrounding the film, it got me thinking about similar attempts on the printed page to reboot and reimagine DC's Last Son of Krypton. As you might imagine, with a character who first appeared in 1938, Superman has been reimagined numerous times throughout its 80+ year history, and although the character has been rebuilt for virtually every generation he's existed in, perhaps the most ambitious and polarising reboot came in 2011 as part of DC's universe-wide relaunch, The New 52. Beginning in September 2011, the New 52 completely wiped the Man of Steel's slate clean. While other characters like Batman and Green Lantern retained some aspects of their history, Superman completely started over from scratch, allowing a new set of writers and artists to redefine what he represents in this new continuity. The writers tasked with introducing this Superman were George Perez, who initially wrote the hero's self-titled series, and Grant Morrison, whose 18-issue run on Action Comics retold Clark Kent's origin and his first year as a superhero. While it's no secret I'm a huge fan of Morrison's work, particularly when they're writing The Man of Tomorrow, and adore books like All-Star Superman and their run on JLA, this Action Comics series has always intrigued and fascinated me. Teaming with artist Rags Morales, Morrison sought to return Superman to his Golden Age roots, reincorporating many aspects from his earlier stories in the late 1930s and reimagining what it means for Superman to be the champion of the oppressed in a modern world. But beyond that, Action Comics is a meta-commentary on the Superman character and his history itself, dissecting how each generation has transformed the hero into something new, and questioning how he can exist as both a symbol of imagination, hope and resistance created by 2 second-generation Jewish immigrants, as well as a corporate symbol and a mascot for a multi-billion-dollar media juggernaut. So in this video, I want to explain the history behind Superman in the New 52, discuss how this reboot came to be, and how Morrison sought to return the character to his roots, as well as deconstruct the idea of who Superman is, and consider how this bold reimagining of the Last Son of Krypton fits into the character's long and storied history. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. To understand how Morrison approached reinventing Superman in the New 52, and what these 18 issues attempt to say about the Man of Tomorrow, it's first worth briefly exploring Morrison's history with the Superman character, as well as the goings-on at DC Comics that led up to this universe-wide relaunch in 2011. Grant Morrison is one of the most prolific Superman writers of their generation. After breaking into mainstream comics in the mid to late 1980s, thanks to books like Animal Man, Doom Patrol, and the Batman one-shot Arkham Asylum, they were eventually eventually tasked with taking over the Justice League comic in 1997. Alongside artist Howard Porter, they restored the team's classic lineup and reasserted them as the central piece of the DC universe, and as you might expect, the Last Son of Krypton played a key role in many of its stories. While Morrison was writing JLA though, they teamed up with fellow writers Mark Waid, Tom Peyer and Mark Miller to create a proposal to revamp the company's flagship hero, drafting a 21-page document entitled Superman 2000. Morrison and co. claimed that Superman required reinvention every 15 years in order to update the hero's core themes and ensure that he remained relevant to modern audiences. Therefore, the pitch was a radical reinvention of Superman's mythos, proposing changing everything from his costume, removing the long-serving trunks, erasing the marriage between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, and wanting to focus more on Superman's isolation as an alien living amongst humans. Despite DC editor Eddie Berganza asking Morrison and co. to write this proposal, Superman 2000 was ultimately vetoed and cancelled by DC. However, numerous aspects from it have appeared in subsequent Superman comics, namely Mark Waid's Birthright, Miller's Red Son, and Morrison's All-Star Superman. Released between November of 2005 and October of 2008, All-Star Superman saw Morrison team with longtime collaborator Frank Quitely, and tell what has often been regarded as one of the greatest Superman stories of all time. Told across 12 issues, All-Star showcases Clark as he slowly begins to die, focusing on the hero's relationship with legacy and mortality, while he tries to make the world a better place before his death. All-Star Superman's release also coincided with Morrison's tenure writing Batman, as well as the 2008 crossover event, Final Crisis. During the final stages of Morrison's run on Batman though, DC publicly announced their intentions to reboot their entire comic book universe following the events of the Flashpoint miniseries. In May of 2011, DC co-publishers Jim Lee and Dan DiDio formally unveiled this as the New 52, promising a new look slate of monthly titles, as well as a brand new continuity that would reimagine many of the company's biggest heroes. And as part of this relaunch, Morrison was approached to be part of the new creative team for Superman. While George Perez would write the hero's self-titled comic, and Jeff Johns would introduce the Man of Steel in his Justice League series, Morrison was tasked with penning Action Comics, which would serve as a prequel book set 5 years earlier and flesh out the new origin and backstory for this iteration of Superman. Upon meeting with Dan DiDio, Morrison immediately expressed interest in the project, noting they had developed an idea for an early year Superman story in the aftermath of All-Star's release. This idea would focus on a more stripped back and grassroots Superman, harking back to the original version first created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. As Morrison explains in an interview with Comics Alliance,
when Dan came to me and said that he wanted to revamp Superman, I had all these drawings because I wanted to do an early years Superman story after I had done All-Star Superman at the end of his life. So I had a bunch of sketches of Superman just in a t-shirt and jeans, and I really loved the look and I kept coming back to it. So I said to Dan, can we use this look on Superman? And he was really up for it because it very much signaled a change. Once people saw the costume, they knew something different was going on with the character.
Initially, Morrison was hired to write 6 issues of Action Comics, later extended to 18, and were paired with artist Rags Morales. Throughout their tenure, the duo sought to rebuild and reimagine Superman's mythos in this new look continuity, taking Superman back to his earliest incarnations and first introducing him as a brash and idealistic 20-something social crusader, who over the course of the series evolves into the fully formed Man of Tomorrow that we know and love today. As such, their 18-issue run would serve as a guide throughout each era of Superman's history, remixing and reincorporating different aspects of the character's past and building a new version of the Man of Tomorrow who felt both uniquely new and faithful to everything that came before. And so, when Action Comics #1 hit shelves in September of 2011, with its striking and now iconic cover art, it immediately became clear to almost everyone that this would be a reinvention of the beloved hero, unlike anything fans were used to. The initial 8 issues of Action Comics serve as Morrison's updated origin story for the last son of Krypton. We're introduced to a much more street level and grounded version of the character, and throughout these opening 8 issues, we see the introduction and teases of many key aspects of Superman's classic status quo. The series begins with Superman crashing a meeting with media mogul Glenn Morgan. He holds him from the balcony of his building as the police and Glenn Morgan's security try and shoot Clark to no avail, until Superman throws both himself and Glenn Morgan off the building. Superman carries him to safety, and Glenn Morgan confesses that he bribed city officials and used illegal labour for his business. As security rushes downstairs, Superman sternly states, "Treat people right or expect a visit from me." Superman dodges the authorities until he overhears that a building full of squatters is set to be demolished. He leaps in to stop the wrecking ball, only to discover it was a trap arranged by the US military, as General Sam Lane and his ally Lex Luthor watch on from afar. A flurry of tanks then bombards Superman, only for the people he saved to stand in their way and allow him to escape. Later, Clark stops a runaway train in which Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen are passengers on. While Superman is able to save the day, he's pinned against the train and knocked unconscious, where he's captured by the military and interrogated by Luthor and General Lane. We also learn here that the military is developing the Steel Soldier program, until its head John Henry Irons quits in response to Lex's torture of the Man of Steel. Lois Lane tries to enter the base and reason with her father, only to be confronted by Sergeant John Corbin. During their conversation, Lois manages to steal Corbin's passkey and witnesses Superman escaping the base. Clark also discovers a small rocket in the facility, realizing that this is what sent him to Earth as a baby. After Superman leaves, Sergeant Corbin begins human testing on the Steel Soldier project, while Lex communicates with an unseen figure, as a mysterious spaceship appears outside Earth. From here, the following issues follow Clark, Lois, and Jimmy investigating Glenn Morgan, Luthor, and the US military. This leads them to the Factory of Tomorrow, where it's revealed that the train crash was orchestrated by Glenn Morgan in an attempt to privatize and automate the subway with robots. The trio are then attacked by the factory's robots when a strange alien intelligence hacks into them. Meanwhile, Sergeant Corbin dons the Steel Soldier armor, only for that to be hacked as well. Luthor reveals that this is part of his plan, and the unseen figure he's working alongside is actually Brainiac. Brainiac reveals his plans to preserve Earth's artifacts before the planet is annihilated. After Clark escapes the factory, he races back into Metropolis, where he's attacked by Corbin, now entirely under Brainiac's control. Aided by John Henry Irons donning his own armor and becoming steel, Superman battles Metallo until a dome appears throughout the city, trapping a part of Metropolis as Brainiac's ship appears in the sky. The final issues of this story see Clark enter the Collector's ship, discovering the array of artifacts he's gathered from different doomed worlds. These include the bottle city of Kandor and a sleek Kryptonian armor. Brainiac forces Superman to choose between his birthplace and adopted world, stating that in 15 minutes he will cut off life support for either Kandor or the bottle portion of Metropolis. Unwilling to choose, Superman dons the Kryptonian armor and it activates with his DNA, turning blue and emblazoning his family's crest on its chest. With Superman refusing to trade lives, Brainiac summons Metallo to kill him, until Clark frees Corbin from the villain's control. During this fight, Superman realizes that all of the ship's relics are catalogued by importance, and as such, he threatens to destroy Brainiac's most prized possessions if Metropolis and Kandor aren't spared. Brainiac calls the hero's bluff until Superman retrieves the now shrunken down rocket and launches it at Brainiac, stabbing him and allowing Clark to take control of his ship and restore Metropolis to its rightful place. With Brainiac defeated, Superman is celebrated as a hero and gifted the keys to the city. Clark later visits Smallville, where we learn that both Jonathan and Martha Kent have recently passed away. It's during both of these moments that Clark embraces both his human and Kryptonian heritage, choosing to represent the best of both worlds in his pursuit for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Following this, Superman journeys into space and retrieves Brainiac's ship, and turns it into his Fortress of Solitude, signifying the transition from a street-level idealistic vigilante to a full-fledged high-concept superhero. These issues, collected as Superman vs. the City of Tomorrow, showcase Morrison and Morella's attempts to return Superman to his Golden Age roots. With much of Superman's post-crisis history no longer being canon in this new universe, it was up to Morrison and Morales to rebuild the hero status quo from the ground up, effectively taking us on a tour of Superman's past as we see him evolve from his Golden Age champion of the oppressed roots into the full-fledged sci-fi action hero of the Silver Age. The specific use of villains like Metallo and Brainiac in this storyline also make a lot of sense in this context, as their appearance marks the transition from Superman solely battling with the corrupt elite to facing off against otherworldly and more fantastical threats. It's essentially Morrison chronicling how Superman's comics changed from the 1940s and 50s, as the Silver Age ushered in a more cosmic and fantastical era for the character. Brainiac is also depicted as a collector throughout this series, seeking to preserve the status quo at all costs. His battles with Superman ultimately reflects both DC's large-scale reboot and Morrison's dedication to rebuilding the character's mythos, paying homage to everything that came before, while still challenging readers with bold changes to who and what Superman is. It should also be noted that similar to All-Star Superman before it, Morrison uses this series to comment on and discuss the legacy of their late father Walter Morrison. Whereas All-Star was Morrison reflecting on the grief and loss that they felt following their father's death in 2004, Action Comics feels like a celebration of their father's trade unionist and activist roots, creating a much more radical and politically minded Superman that evokes Morrison's memories of their father's activism during their childhood. Writing in the Gutter review, Sean Dillon observes how Morrison infused their father's memory into this take on the Man of Steel, noting that
the influence of their father would linger within their understanding of the idea of Superman. This can be best seen in their Action Comics run. In the wake of the New 52, Grant Morrison, alongside artist Rags Morales, was given the opportunity to create a new origin for the champion of the oppressed. So, much like their father, Morrison made Superman a socialist, or at least as much as one as DC would allow. They had Superman face off against billionaires who hurt people in the name of greed, demonic corporate IP that seek to destroy the competition, and literal, actual Nazis.
Although Morrison intended to only write 6 issues of Action Comics, their initial arc was extended to 8, with issues 5 and 6 being fill-in stories. They were later convinced to remain on board until issue 18. As such, with this new version of The Last Son of Krypton now established, the remainder of this series continued the exciting meta journey throughout Superman's history, taking this new incarnation of the character through the Silver, Bronze and Modern ages of the hero's publication, all while examining what exactly Superman represents and how his myth has continuously evolved throughout the decades. The latter half of Grant Morrison and Rags Morales' Action Comics series builds off the foundations established in these opening 8 issues. With this new version of Superman now introduced and much of his lore and backstory explained, the duo sought to tell a story that deconstructed and analysed what the Last Son of Krypton symbolises, and how both his image and legacy have been evolved and changed by various writers and publishers over the last 70 years. Issue 9 is quite unexpected if you are reading the comic each month, as instead of following Clark Kent in the aftermath of his fight with Brainiac, it shifts focus to Earth 23 and its Superman Calvin Ellis. Ellis was a character created by Morrison and Doug Mahnke during Final Crisis, and on his Earth is not only Superman but also the President of the United States. We follow Ellis on his everyday heroics until a mysterious woman emerges from a portal in need of his help. The woman is being chased by a hulking creature that Ellis fights, eventually being reluctantly aided by this universe's Lex Luthor. Ellis and Lex fend off the creature, and the woman reveals herself to be Lois Lane from Earth 45. Lois states that in her reality, she and Clark created the concept of Superman. Seeking to bring it to life, they sold their idea to a company called Overcore, who turned their character into an all-consuming faceless monster that allowed the corporation to take over the world, before venturing out into the multiverse to kill different versions of the Superman archetype. Ellis offers Lois sanctuary on his Earth, and she responds by saying that he might just be Superman done right. This comic serves as a prologue to the overarching story that unfolds throughout the rest of this series, focusing on the monstrous creature later named Super Doom and its mysterious creator, Lord Vindictovic. In the meantime, we follow Superman encountering an array of new and old foes, such as Captain Comet, Nimrod the Hunter, and the Kryptonian prisoner Zardu. These adventures are all framed via Vindictovic recruiting each villain to join his anti-Superman army, all while Clark continues to evolve and challenge his status quo. Specifically, in issue 10, Clark Kent is seemingly killed when a suicide bomber attacks the Daily Star offices, causing Superman to question the need for his civilian alter ego. This leads to a great exchange between Superman and Batman, where Bruce reminds him of the good that he can bring to the world, both as a superhero and as an everyday kind person. These issues also tease strange occurrences throughout Superman's life, In issue 12, during his fight with Captain Comet, he experiences flashbacks to a life he's never lived, where he works at the Daily Planet, is married to Lois Lane, and his adopted parents are still alive. Eventually, at the end of issue 12, Clark speaks with his landlady Mrs. Nixley about these problems. Morrison then reveals that Mrs. Nixley is a fifth-dimensional being and the wife of longtime Superman adversary Mr. Mxyzptlk. She explains that her husband is held captive by Vindictivich, who is also a fifth-dimensional creature hellbent on destroying the very idea of Superman, and that she was tasked with protecting Clark from the villain. Their conversation is interrupted when Mrs. Nixley is shot by Vindictivich's anti-Superman army, leading to a climactic showdown that runs through the final 6 issues. Just as much as this run served to rebuild Superman for this new continuity, this storyline serves as Morrison's thesis statement on the Superman character, what he represents and stands for, and how his long and storied history exists within the framework of this sleek new continuity. It's explained that Vindictivich used his fifth-dimensional powers to fight Superman in both the past, present, and future, changing the entire course of the hero's history, with such heinous acts as killing the Kents years before they were destined to pass away. This is coupled with the reveal of Super Doom in issue 16, the giant doomsday-like creature who Vindictivich unleashes across the multiverse to kill different Superman archetypes. Superman's battle with Vindictivich and Super Doom in the final issue features monologues from the villain that mention how Clark has devolved from an idea crafted by hard-working everyday people to a corporate symbol and an IP, with Vindictivich even mockingly suggesting that Superman replace his trademark S with a $sign. This, coupled with the use of a doomsday-like villain, feels like Morrison critiquing the modern era of Superman comics. Alongside this, the revelation that Vindictivich caused the deaths of the Kents, and by extension created a darker status quo for the Superman character, feels like Morrison critiquing DC's overall approach for how they handled Superman in the New 52, and how DC attempted to use this reboot to not only strip away much of Superman's history, but present a much more darker and somber version of the character. Nevertheless, this plot concludes in issue 18, where Superman, aided by a debuting Krypto, the time-travelling legion of superheroes, and most unexpectedly Lex Luthor, overcomes Super Doom's assault and Vindictivich's mental torture. As Lois and Jimmy search for Mr. Mxyzptlk, Clark tricks the villain into binding the world's consciousness together, allowing Superman to command the people of Earth to say their own names backwards in unison, thereby banishing Vindictivich back to the 5th dimension. Despite the villain's power and his anti-Superman army, it's the planet's collective belief in Superman and themselves that allows Clark to overcome this threat, saving the world and defying the dark and twisted archetype that he was forced to encounter. The comic's final page details Superman's triumph as he reunites with Mrs. Nixley, who offers to undo Vindictivich's schemes and reset his status quo to how it was supposed to be. Clark, though, refuses, accepting who he is and the evolution he's been through in these 18 issues. Instead, he asks her to use her powers to help others before flying back into action. Lois Lane then tries to call Clark, checking that he's okay after the battle, as we witness Clark smiling and embracing Krypto, stating that he's been busy following an incredible story. Following the release of issue 18 in March of 2013, both Grant Morrison and Rags Morales would depart from Action Comics. In their place, Andy Diggle and Tony Daniel were initially appointed as the book's new co-writers. However, Diggle quit the series before their debut issue even hit shelves, with Daniel also departing 2 issues later. After a 2-part story by Scott Lobdell, Greg Pak and Aaron Kuder became Action Comics' new creative team as of issue 25. Pak and Kuder's run stands alongside Morrison's tenure as the best set of Superman comics during the New 52. The pair worked on the book until May of 2016, when the title was relaunched as part of the Final Days of Superman storyline. The New 52 iteration of the Man of Steel was killed off in Superman number 52, with his pre-Flashpoint counterpart, who was reintroduced during the Convergence event, later taking his place, with DC eventually retconning this during their Rebirth initiative. As such, this experiment in creating an all-new version of The Last Son of Krypton remains a fascinating period of modern comic book history. While the overall sentiments on Superman's run in the New 52 seems to be predominantly mixed, Morrison and Morales' tenure on Action Comics remains one of the most beloved titles to come out of this initiative. For me personally, the New 52 was a major jumping on point and helped me get back into regularly reading DC Comics. And amongst the litany of great books that I discovered during this period, Action Comics Comics was a title I read every single issue of, from its debut all the way to its conclusion in July 2016. I remember seeing the cover of issue 1 randomly and being in such awe. It felt almost punk rock, and a version of Superman unlike anything I'd ever seen up until that point. And I think that uniqueness, combined with how Morrison recontextualized Superman's Golden Age incarnation, is a big reason as to why this era of comics is so fondly remembered. But I've also grown to really appreciate this run for how it chronicles the Man of Tomorrow's evolution, and reincorporates so many classic elements into this brand new status quo. During the making of this video, I sat down with Doug from For Every Kind of Geek to discuss Morrison's approach to reimagining Superman, and what he thinks the writer attempted to say about the long history of the Man of Tomorrow, and how he fits into the unique world of the New 52.
Funnily enough, the New 52 is one of the things that got me back into DC Comics, and then I'd sort of hopped around the various titles, but I think I actually discovered Grant's Action Comics back when I was starting my channel. Starting this channel, I would say, is like the flashpoint for when I started becoming aware of just like all of the meta elements of comics before I started reading them for all the stuff beyond the story, and the more I started like digging into creators and publication history. So this was kind of like the perfect opportunity to read Action Comics and really like appreciate it on those terms. Like, funnily enough, I think this series in particular is what really drew me into Grant's work, because it's all about the power of comic book heroes as icons both in and out of fiction. They can inspire people, but they're also kind of these corporate products. They're symbols, but symbols can mean different things. It's just really cool to see a series that is like the most literal form of deconstruction, literally just pulling this character apart piece by piece, iconography, theme, like humanity, and just seeing how all of these elements can come into being and how they can be remixed and reinterpreted through the decades. It's neat seeing how it starts as one thing, like a very broad concept, but then evolves into this all-encompassing celebration of history. And specifically, I guess this is like a celebration of Superman's history, going from the Golden Age into the Silver Age, through the Bronze Age, and kind of giving, not really a statement, but kind of asking a question about like, what is this character deep down? What does he fundamentally represent? And who is he? It's very interesting seeing how they kind of navigate between these different eras of Superman, because I feel like the one thing we can agree on is like, obviously there's a through line, but narratively we're kind of hopping back and forth between these eras. And I think it's interesting because I think that's also part of the intent. Like, obviously the New 52 had its own shipping schedule, which means Grant had to bring in other artists to fill in like the work while Rags Morales was doing his thing. But I also think, like, granted, this is from my perspective, that herky-jerky sort of non-linearity becomes part of the text of the story. I feel like I just keep circling this point, but it really sells the idea that this is not just a look at one era in particular, or even kind of like recreating Superman's evolution in a story term, but it's just, pulling this character into like each part of what makes him into this specific combination.
Despite the New 52 aiming to streamline their characters' backstories and canon, Morrison's thesis is that Superman is everything. He's a working class hero who protects the downtrodden and the oppressed, a cosmic sci-fi character who battles aliens and time travelers, a patriotic symbol of the American dream, a corporate mascot and a brand, but also the manifestation of two working class Jewish immigrants during the Second World War. All of these pieces of Superman's myth are seemingly at odds with one another. However, Morrison attempts to explore and deconstruct them, both individually and as part of this wider mythology. Specifically, the series climax focuses on the hero battling a monstrous version of himself created from corporate greed, and the demonic entity eager to strip away every aspect of the Superman myth that it doesn't deem profitable. These issues feel like a literal battle for Superman's soul, and despite the many high concept plots and wacky characters throughout this run, they make the comic feel like a profound commentary on Superman's past, present and future, exploring what this character means and represents, and restoring the innocence from his golden and silver age incarnations. From that perspective, I think that Action Comics is a great continuation of many of the themes and ideas established in Morrison's other DC works, such as All-Star Superman and Final Crisis. As a result, I think this series is best read not necessarily as part of the New 52 Superman's origin, but simply as a standalone love letter to the preceding 73 years of Superman's adventures. By weaving together different incarnations of the Man of Steel, Morrison and Morales craft a unique version of the hero that feels like a homage to every aspect of his past, and providing a foundation for this new modern era of the last son of Krypton. Some of these influences may at first glance seem like they're contradictory to one another, but to Morrison, what unites all these different versions of Superman is his unwavering dedication to protecting those in need, serving as a role model and an ideal to strive towards, and never being afraid to use his abilities for good no matter the cost. Superman ultimately is timeless, quintessential, and remains just as relevant now as he was back in 1938. He's a force for good, using his might to guide us towards a better tomorrow, not solely through hope, but as the comic's title boldly declares, also through action.
A lot of people apply this concept of hope to Superman. While I appreciate it and I get what they're talking about in this almost Christ-like messianic sense that Superman can sometimes have, I think that's the wrong approach. Superman doesn't sum up hope. Superman's keyword is action. He didn't appear in Hope comics, he appeared in Action Comics. And Superman is not someone who just floats in space, ethereal with his cape flying and suggests somewhere we could eventually reach. Superman says, no, do it now. Action. And we have to remember that. That's the essential quality of that character, I think.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/OwenLikesComics, or if you just want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, just at Owen Likes Comics. But that's all for this video. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.